Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are really undertaking quite a critical mission.
Oh, yeah.
We're
Let's-
charting the ideological blueprint, the very foundations of American law and government.
Okay. Ambitious.
It is.
Yeah.
We want to go beyond just the dates and names, really dive deep into that core question the founders wrestled with.
Oh, do?
How do you design a government that's, well, strong enough to actually enforce laws, but, and this is key, weak enough so it doesn't become tyrannical?
That tension.
Yeah,
That's pretty much the whole story, isn't it?
exactly.
So our goal for you today, listening in, is to trace these specific interconnected principles, the ones that really underlie America's founding documents.
How are we approaching that?
We're pulling together material from various civics and historical government sources. The idea is to show you not just what the concepts are, but the journey they took.
From historical necessity to revolutionary philosophy.
Precisely. How these ideas evolved.
So we're looking at where they came from, how they got shaped, and what they actually became in practice.
Right. And I think if you, the listener, understand these ideological roots, you basically hold the essential vocabulary for understanding almost every major structural debate that's happening right now.
Couldn't agree more. So we'll focus on three crucial stages.
Yep.
First, those historical precedents, the limitations baked into English law. Then, the big one, the Enlightenment, that sort of intellectual engine.
Right. The philosophy.
And finally, how that all synthesized into, well, what we see as the 6 core principles that form the DNA of the American system.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting with that foundation of, well, it sounds like distrust, really, the English experience.
Distrust is a good word for it.
It seems like the founders didn't just invent limited government out of thin air. They inherited this long tradition of pushing back against power.
They absolutely did. You really have to go back centuries. I mean, the principles the founders were leaning on, they trace directly back to these landmark English documents.
Documents designed specifically to limit the king. Exactly. To limit the monarch's power and, importantly, assert individual and group rights.
Okay, so let's talk specifics. Nothing quite screams limitations like the Magna Carta, right? 1215. Seems ancient, but critical.
Oh, absolutely critical. The Magna Carta set up 2 huge structural precedents that honestly still define our system today.
What are they?
First, the king was basically forced to grant his subjects the right to a fair trial by jury. That cemented this early idea of, justice and due process.
Okay, that's big. And the second?
The second is maybe even more crucial for limiting government power directly. The king had to agree he couldn't just impose new taxes whenever he felt like it.
Ah, without consent.
Without the consent of the barons, yes. That specific check.
Wait a second. If we connect that forward, that consent mechanism, isn't that essentially the seed for the power of the purse in the U.S. government?
You got it. That limitation on the king's ability to tax, it translates almost directly into the exclusive taxation power given to the U.S. House of Representatives.
Wow, so that's a direct structural inheritance.
It really is. That agreement, back in 1215, it forced England down the path of becoming a limited monarchy. The ruler was now under the law, not above it.
And that need for consent, not just royal command.
That became the bedrock, right? Their very foundation for why the colonies later resisted taxation without representation. It wasn't a new idea for them.
So the precedent is set really early. Now, let's jump forward quite a bit, like 5 centuries, to the English Bill of Rights in 1689. This feels different, more focused on the individual.
It was a huge leap forward, absolutely. Yeah. It came right after the Glorious Revolution, where Parliament basically said, okay, we are supreme, not the king.
And in doing that,
in asserting that power, they cemented rights that, they sound incredibly familiar, like they were pulled right out of our own Declaration of Independence or Bill of Rights.
Such as?
Guaranteed rights to life, liberty, and property. No excessive punishments, the right to a fair and speedy trial. It's all there.
So the foundation gets stronger, limited power, and explicitly listed individual rights established through this English struggle.
Right. But back across the Atlantic, the colonists weren't just waiting around absorbing these English ideas. They were already putting self-government into practice, weren't they?
They were, long before the revolution really kicked off.
And that's where something like the Mayflower Compact back in 1620 becomes really significant.
How so?
Well, think about it. Pilgrim colonists, they weren't waiting for instructions from a king. They just agreed amongst themselves. They decided to form and obey their own government.
Based on mutual consent.
Exactly. That single act right there, it starts the whole tradition of self-government and the consent of the governed right here in the colonies.
So it shows they were already living these ideas of popular sovereignty even before the philosophers really spelled them out.
Absolutely, they were practicing it.
Okay, so this is fascinating. The English system creates this foundation built on distrust of central power. It demands individual rights, structural limits. Now, here's where, for me, it gets really interesting. How did philosophers take that raw historical experience, that distrust, and shape it into a concrete, even revolutionary system design?
Ah, yes. This is where we bring in the Enlightenment engine, as you called it.
Right.
It's really about applying reason, logic,
Mhm.
applying rational thought to governance itself, questioning traditions like divine right.
Instead of just accepting the king's authority because, well, he's the king.
Right. Thinkers started asking why. On what basis does this power rest?
And when we talk about the core philosophical influences on the American founding, John Locke, he seems absolutely central.
Oh, completely. Locke's ideas provided, you could argue, the radical moral justification for the American break from England.
What were his key concepts that resonated so much?
Locke introduced two concepts that are just foundational. First, this idea of natural law.
Well,
This wasn't something granted by a king or a parliament. Locke argued that individuals have basic, inherent rights, life, liberty, and property simply because they're human.
inherent rights, meaning they exist before government.
Exactly. They are inalienable. They precede any government, and they actually supersede it. Government doesn't grant them. It's supposed to protect them.
That is, well, that's a radical shift, isn't it? It completely flips the script on the relationship between the people and the government.
It really does.
If my rights come from nature or God, depending on interpretation, then the government isn't doing me a favor by existing. It's there to do a job, protect what I already possess.
Precisely. And that leads directly into his second crucial concept, the social contract.
Okay, explain that one.
Locke defined this as this sort of implicit agreement. The community, the people, agree to obey the ruler, but, and this is a huge but,
Okay.
only because the ruler agrees, in return, to protect the community and, crucially, their natural rights.
Ah, so it's a two-way street. What's the massive implication there then?
The implication is revolutionary. If the ruler fails to uphold their end of the bargain, if they fail to protect those rights, or worse, actively violate them,
The contract is broken.
the contract is broken. And the governed, the people, have the right card. Locke would even say the obligation to dissolve that government and set up a new one that will protect their rights.
And that right there is basically the core argument of the Declaration of Independence, isn't it?
It's the philosophical heart of it, yes.
Yep.
That framework turned what could have been just a tax revolt into a full-blown revolutionary fight for self-determination based on these reasoned principles.
Okay, but even if you establish this new government based on natural rights and the social contract, you still face that original problem, that tension we started with.
Right. How do you stop the new government from becoming just as tyrannical as the old king?
Exactly. And that's where Montesquieu comes in, I assume.
Montesquieu tackled the practical mechanics. How do you build safeguards into the structure itself? His big idea, the one the founders really latched onto, was the separation of powers.
To prevent power from concentrating.
Exactly. To prevent that inevitable consolidation of power that historically always seemed to lead to tyranny. The government has to be internally divided against itself, in a way.
He didn't just say divide it up, though. He identified three distinct functions of governing, right?
Yes, that's key. He saw the legislative function making the laws, representing the people's will, the executive function enforcing those laws, and the judicial function interpreting the laws, settling disputes.
Okay.
But the real genius, and what the American founders really internalized, wasn't just listing them. It was the idea that these branches must be separate, distinct, and given enough power to actively check each other.
So the separation isn't just for neatness, it's functional. It's meant to create friction.
Necessary friction. Necessary antagonism, almost. It's designed to promote stability, not through harmony, but through constant negotiation and compromise between branches that have competing interests but shared power.
This mix of English history, these limitations, and then these Enlightenment ideas. It wasn't just sitting in books on shelves, was it? It was actively driving the independence movement.
Oh, absolutely. And you see that powerfully with someone like Thomas Paine and his pamphlet, Common Sense.
Paine was the mobilizer.
You could say that. He was a brilliant synthesizer. He took Locke's sometimes complex philosophical arguments and Montesquieu's structural ideas and just made them incredibly accessible, urgent even.
In 1776, right when decisions needed to be made.
Exactly. He argued very forcefully that the colonies didn't just have the right based on these ideas, but they had the intellectual framework ready to go. Declare independence now, he said, and adopt a truly representative self-government immediately.
Okay. That brings us perfectly to the final and maybe the most important part of this deep dive.
Right.
When you put it all together, the historical limits learned from England, the philosophical justifications from thinkers like Locke and Montesquieu, you get the blueprint. Let's nail down those 6 core principles that seem to emerge as the bedrock.
Yeah, these are the principles that pretty much everyone involved in the founding could agree on, even if they argued about the details. They aren't just definitions. They are the governing philosophy itself.
Where should we start?
Let's begin with the one that underpins basic order, the rule of law.
Okay, we hear that phrase thrown around a lot. But what does the source material tell us it specifically meant to the founders?
The rule of law means, fundamentally, that everyone has to follow the same rules. And crucially, that includes the government itself. The law applies equally to the governed and the governors.
No one is above the law.
No one. It's the ultimate check against arbitrary action, against a ruler just doing whatever they want. The president, Congress, you, me, all answerable to the same legal standards.
That's a direct rejection of the old idea of a king being above the law. Okay, second principle, coming straight from Locke, natural rights.
Correct. The core idea here is simple but profound. We are all born with certain basic inherent rights. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Jefferson's famous phrasing of Locke's concepts.
Not rights granted by government.
No, they are innate. They exist independent of government. And the implication is powerful. If a law violates a natural right, then under this ideology, that law itself is fundamentally illegitimate.
Okay. Next, building on those English historical precedents, the principle of limited government.
Limited government is basically the structural manifestation of that deep-seated fear of tyranny we talked about.
How does it work?
It means the government only has the powers that are explicitly given to it, usually in a constitution, nothing more. If a power isn't listed or clearly implied, the government simply cannot exercise it.
So it's a default no unless specified.
Pretty much. Power is seen as inherently dangerous, so it has to be strictly confined and enumerated.
Okay, so if the government's power is limited, the next principle seems essential for protecting citizens from the abuse of even those limited powers. Due process of law.
Exactly. Due process is all about procedure. It's the guarantee of fairness.
Fairness in what way?
It ensures that your life, your liberty, your property, they can't be taken away by the government without a fair process. This traces right back to those Magna Carta trial rights.
So things like a trial notice, an opportunity to be heard.
Yes, procedural justice. It means everyone gets their day in court, metaphorically speaking, and the government has to follow established rules when it acts against a citizen.
Got it. And what about the ideal that really provided the maybe moral compass for the revolution? Equality of mankind.
This is another foundational one. It establishes that every single person has inherent equal value simply as a human being.
Now, obviously, the practice of equality in 1776 was, well, deeply flawed. A massive contradiction with slavery.
A profound contradiction, yes. It's undeniable and crucial historical context. But the ideology itself, the principle being stated, was that no person, regardless of their status, background, or wealth, is fundamentally worth more than any other in the eyes of the law.
So it set an ideological standard.
Exactly. A standard against which the nation's actions could, and arguably must, be constantly measured and judged.
Okay. And finally, a principle that was already being put into practice in several colonies, seen as absolutely essential, the protection of religious liberty.
Yes, freedom of conscience. This means you should be free to practice your own religion, or, importantly, no religion at all, without the government interfering or forcing you one way or the other.
Why was this so critical for them?
Well, remember the history. Many colonists had fled religious persecution in Europe. They were deeply opposed to the idea of establishing a state church, like the Church of England, which could dictate religious belief or practice. It was seen as essential for a diverse and genuinely free society.
Okay, so if we tie this all together, these 6 bedrock concepts, rule of law, natural rights, limited government, due process, equality, and religious liberty, they really form the essential vocabulary, don't they?
They do. They're synthesized directly from that English history and the Enlightenment philosophy we discussed. They define the American ideological blueprint.
They're the lens, maybe, through which every government action and law is supposed to be viewed.
That's a great way to put it. We started way back with wanting to limit a king's power in 1215, layered on the incredible power of reason and the social contract from the Enlightenment.
And the result was this clear, articulated set of core principles meant to define the new republic.
Exactly.
So, wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener, today? Understanding this journey, from historical pushback to philosophical design to these codified principles, it really feels foundational.
It truly is. I mean, the whole reason for digging into this material, the rationale, is that knowing where these ideas originated lets you evaluate how they're actually functioning now.
It moves you beyond just reacting to today's news.
Right. It helps you understand the ideological stakes in contemporary debates.
Mhm.
And that, at the end of the day, is what informed and active citizenship is all about.
Well, this definitely raises a big question for you to consider as you finish listening to this deep dive.
Go on.
If the entire structure of American governance is built on this constant inherent the tension between protecting individual liberty on one hand and ensuring the government is strong enough to enforce the rule of law on the other, how might evaluating the current impact and interpretation of these founding principles affect how we think about potential solutions or reforms for the issues and debates we face today in American law and government?
That's the ongoing question, isn't it? Something to definitely chew on. The conversation, as always, continues. Thanks for diving deep with us.